Hello there, this is Stephanie Rose. I was driving home today. I dropped the kids off with their father at the park because I have some schoolwork that I need to get done. So I was driving home and I saw a man on a bike, riding along next to me, and it triggered this old memory for me. I'm 28 years old. When I was 18, I was living in New Mexico for a while, and I was actively addicted to drugs, crack, primarily crack. And I had, wandered through some neighborhood, and I bought some crack, and I was smoking it, from place to place throughout the neighborhood, moving around. And I was walking down a street, and a car went flying down the street really, really fast. And a man who was riding a bicycle got hit. And he went flying over the windshield, over the car, bam, onto the road. And the car that hit him took off, really took off. And I saw this happen. I mean, it happened right in front of me. I was right there, feet away from this guy. And the person who I am today, my reaction today would be to immediately call an ambulance and run over to this person and do whatever I could to try and help them. He was very seriously injured. He actually ended up dying. I found out later on the news that I was watching the news, local news, later that day, and the driver turned out to be a 16-year-old girl who was drag racing, and they found her later. I don't know what happened to her, but she killed this guy. He ended up dying. He was a man in his early 50s, just riding a bike. So I could tell that he was very seriously injured. My reaction at the time was not to help this man. It was not to run over to him. It was not to call an ambulance. It was not to hold a person's hand as they're dying so that they're not left alone in the street to die like some kind of animal or piece of garbage. I mean, every human being deserves to have at least one other person to show them some compassion in their final moments, at least. But that isn't what I did, and that was not my reaction in any way, because I was addicted to crack. And I behaved in a way that you might anticipate a crack addict to behave. I thought about myself and the fact that I wanted to use drugs over this man who was just struck by a car right in front of me. So I was concerned that police would come and that I might be questioned about it and that they would find my drugs and I wouldn't be able to get high. So I took off. I didn't say anything to this man. I didn't call an ambulance and then walk away. I just took off and I got high. And I felt really sad remembering this. I wish that I could go back and provide some comfort for this person in his final moments, and I feel really sad that I didn't do that. A lot of people feel like addicts are just morally bankrupt individuals. They just don't have any morals, they don't have any self-control, and that's why they're addicts. And well, it's true that we often lack self-control. It's much more complicated than that. And I've always been a very empathetic person. I'm going to school right now for nursing because I want to help people. I'm actually interested in hospice, ironically enough. I really want to be with people who are dying. So that is a huge passion of my heart. But yet, as an 18-year-old who was addicted to drugs, that wasn't how I acted. As a child, before I started using drugs, I was very empathetic. I think I'm just naturally have that inclination, and also it was really instilled in me by my mother. She always taught me to have compassion and empathy and to, take care of people who really need it. So that's always been a part of who I am. But drugs, when you are a drug addict, your brain is in survival mode. Every human being, I don't care who you are, how great you are, how morally upstanding you are, if you are starving to death, you will do things that you never thought you would do to get food. Because your brain is saying, I'm dying, and I don't want to die, we need food. And people, this has been tragically documented because of, horrible things like war. People will do almost anything. Majority of people will do almost anything to get food when they're starving to death. And the addict brain feels like it's going to die without the drugs. Instead of food and water, we replace it with our drug, crack, heroin, whatever it may be. And addicts behave as if their life depends on getting high. And in a way you can see, if you really think about it, why that is. Most addicts start using drugs because there's something wrong in their life. A lot of us didn't have coping skills. A lot of us have emotional problems that we didn't know what to do with. And the drugs help us feel like we can live, And eventually the drugs, our brain gets things confused and puts drugs at the top of the hierarchy, Food and water and everything else comes after get high. So when you see addicts who are just doing absolutely anything to get high, think about how someone would act if they were starving to death and they needed to eat. Because that's basically how they're acting. They're acting on instincts, on survival instincts. And it's not that addicts are just morally bankrupt people. It's just that they aren't capable of living up to the standards that they would have been if they weren't addicted. And I can say for myself, I'm a completely radically different person than I was when I was in active addiction. And I know a whole lot of addicts in recovery who are really amazing people with the biggest hearts that you could imagine. And you dedicate a lot of time and energy and put their whole heart into helping people because they want to help. And so it's not that we just fundamentally lack those qualities. It's that we can't access them when we're in active addiction. So part of the thing, there's a lot of different things that I think about whenever I might get a craving or something for drugs, which thankfully is extraordinarily rare now. But, what I think about, one of the things I think about is that I don't want to be that person again. I don't want to be the kind of person that sees a man get hit by a car right in front of me who's dying on the street and I just walk away. I don't want to be that kind of person, and I'm sad that I was that kind of person, but I'm not today, and I don't ever want to be again. And I just hope that we can extend some compassion and understanding towards people who are in active addiction and understand that we need to be looking at this from, a biopsychosocial point of view. We need to be putting more research into why people behave the way they do when their brains are addicted to drugs, because it really is very chemical, very biological. Not to downplay the psychological issues involved. Obviously there are a lot, but addiction is a medical issue and it needs to be researched, and people need to be treated for their addiction, not outcasted and expected to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps as if it were that easy. Addiction is something that is not within a person's control when they're in that cycle of active addiction. We can learn ways to not relapse and to live in a new way, and then we're able to live up to our full potential morally and be the people that we really want to be. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Bye.